working from home. So to start, I would love to introduce our wonderful panelists today. We are incredibly honored to have Fadi Al-Nabani and Amanda Grossi with us. Will you put their details on? So all their formal credentials will be on the screen now. What I want to do is to tell you a little bit about the people behind the formal credentials. So Fadi has got an illustrious career so far, but what is truly Fadi is that he's a dad of two adults. He's got, well, his daughter is here in Dubai with her family. They've got a 6-year-old son, and I think that takes all the pressure away from Fadi, having that little young man to play with and to make him realize what life is all about. So Fadi's son is chief surgeon at the George Hopkins Hospital in Beirut. I think we all know George Hopkins. It was in the news recently with that terrible blast. He's specializing in a very specialist degree. I had to ask Adi for it, endovascular surgery. That's a new advanced surgery that's to do with the veins. Thankfully, he's been uninjured in the blast. His whole house was demolished, but he's still going on a few weeks after this, and they're back at work. So, Fadi, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to hear your insights. And then I would love to tell you about Amanda. So Amanda as well, been in various HRD roles in the past. She's currently working on wellness and coaching and moving her career in that direction simply because of the need for that these days. Amanda's also a keen cyclist, having completed a few grueling Argus races that spans more than 100 kilometers at a time. She also loves cooking, and something no one knows about her is that she will gladly give up HR and counseling to become a sommelier one day. So Amanda, thank you for you joining us today. We look forward to hear your insights. I think let's get straight on to it. Our first question has to do with policies. So I think all of us have implemented policies. I'd like to know what new policies was implemented, why was it implemented, and what was the result? Fadi, can I start with you to give us some insights?
Yes. Thank you very much for the introduction, Diana. As a matter of fact, it's St. George Hospital in Beirut. Even though he did go to George Hopkins Hospital in the States for a couple of months last year, but it is St. George Hospital in Beirut. First of all, thanks for everybody for attending this event. This is a very interesting topic. As a matter of fact, we are covering over here what is important for each and every HR person nowadays. Surely, we are all affected with the pandemic. All businesses have been affected by the pandemic in different industries, and definitely because of the economical cycle. Not a single industry has been affected. All of them have been affected in a way or another, and the companies have reacted almost in the same way, but at different levels. Now, with regards to the policies that have been implemented and what is the result, or what was the result of these policies, a good number of policies have been implemented. Let's start, for instance, with the working from home, or the excuse me, I have an issue over here. Okay, working from home was the first or the distance. I'm sorry.
Yes. I believe, Fadi, that quite a few people have implemented work from home in various schemes as well. I'm keen to hear whether the work from home policy has actually been able to have the employees feel comfortable, feel safe in that environment, in the working from home, where they fully understood what it meant. And how did the companies, the management, accept the work from home policies that HR had recommended, or actually HR had to do that?
Distance working has been the result of the pandemic because of the lockdown that happened in many countries. A lot of governments have implemented the work from home. A lot of companies are still doing it. A good number of multinational companies are still very prudent to bring the employees back to work, even though in Dubai, for instance, companies are allowed to come back 100% to the office. However, the multinational companies have been very, very careful, and they are keeping this until the end of this year. Now, the work conditions over here, nobody knows whether this is going to be permanent or this is going to be temporary. This is something that has affected our lives. Our lives have been affected in a way where this is the new normal. Social distancing is becoming something that is living with us. Even in the same house, if somebody is coming from outside, you know, we are avoiding the hugging. So this applies on each and every part of our lives currently.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, would you like to say anything, Amanda, on this?
Yes, thank you, Fadi. That's true. I think we've got a few questions here that I will leave with you and then move on to Amanda. So Aideen asks a very interesting question. Does the work from home address the change in working conditions? So do you have to put that in the policy? And does the address of the employee need to be added into the policy and reported to the authorities? So I'm going to move to Amanda, leave this question with you, Fadi. Amanda, policies that had been implemented in your company, can you give me a rundown of what it was and what was the result of that?
Yes, like everybody else, we also implemented a work from home policy, which was actually something I proposed to the CEO 2 years ago. It was heavily frowned upon, as I'm sure most of the people around the table will have experienced over the past few years. Working from home is something I've been very used to for more than 10 years. And so going into the organization and proposing it was not very well received. However, it didn't stop me to prepare the policy and to discuss it with my team. I went a step further because having worked for UK companies previously, I also wanted to have a return to office policy. And initially that was really focused at people who take prolonged sick leave, women from maternity leave, and just slowly reintegrating them back into the office. And of course, when the pandemic hit us earlier this year, in the GCC, Kuwait was the first country that announced that everybody had to work from home, and we had very little time to prepare for that. Luckily, my team was ready. So they knew about the work from home policy. They knew all the steps we had to take. We also engaged with IT very, very quickly to make sure that basically within 3 days, we mobilized 700 people who were working from 4 different offices in our Kuwait organization. to work from home, and it was pretty seamless. There were a few IT hiccups with people mainly having internet connectivity, but the work from home policy worked really well because we were prepared. As all of us know, when the organization announces a change, everybody jumps on the phone and wants HR to have all the answers ready. And thankfully, my team was ready to support individuals, and we could very clearly and explain to them what's going to happen, in what phases we were going to do that, which was something we just tweaked as soon as the announcement was made. The return to office policy is something that is ongoing as people are slowly returning to the office, but that also meant that we were ready for it. And I think in a time of a crisis, and I'm sure there will be other crises going forward, what's really important is the readiness and the confidence in the HR community to let people know that we've got this. And that's all people need, really. They just want to know that somebody knows what's going on and somebody will lead them through the huge change, the difficulty and the challenges. So those are the two policies I'd like to highlight.
Well, thanks. Thank you for that, Amanda. An interesting question arises that what I've mentioned here, how does that affect us legally? Evangeline asked the question, do we need to do an amendment in the contract? I'd love to hear you and Fadi's views on that. And also, do we need to notify the authorities?
I'll answer that question in phases, if I may, Fadi. I'm going to jump in here. There is no legal requirement to inform the government of people's home addresses. However, as employers, it's important for us, especially in this part of the world, to have a next of kin process. We actually use gulfHR to record our next of kin, and we have a next of kin policy where we've asked people to make sure that they identify two adults, and we have people's home addresses, and we have a drive every 3 to 6 months where we ask employees to update their information. So at any point of time, HR's got access to where people live, who to contact in case of an absolute emergency. And that next of kin contact has to be an adult, because nobody wants a colleague to phone a 6-year-old child to give them news that they're not ready for. So I think it's important to have that ready from an HR point of view, but legally there's no requirement to advise the government where people are. They know exactly where we are anyway. We all have mobile phones, so.
That's true, that's true. Fadi, and the question to you, thank you, Amanda. Do we need to give our employees a physical copy of the work from home agreement? Do they need to sign it? Can you maybe comment on your thoughts on that?
First of all, I mean, the law does not mention that you have to come to the office. You can, there is a place. Normally the place is the city. Okay, so flexible working hours is something that can be done. Take, for instance, the salespeople. The salespeople, they are on the ground. They are barely 10% of their time at the office. So multinationals, take multinationals. I mean, I used to work for Hewlett Packard. We used to have in UAE a workforce of 550 employees, whereas the office's capacity was 250. And that was way before the pandemic. I mean, I left Hewlett Packard 3 years back, and I was with them for 6 years. So it's not really a legal mandate to have anything related to flexible working hours or working from home. Of course, it can be in a policy to regulate it, but it's not a legal mandate. So does it answer?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Fadi. So I think in summary, what we're saying to each other is almost all has a work from home policy. There are certain conditions that is added in the policy. It seems to be generic. It doesn't have to be given in physically to people, yet they have to know about it. Return to work policies are also in place. What was interesting to me is what Amanda said, that a work from home policy has other policies that are downstream that also has to be looked at, such as update your information, your next of kin, and those kind of things. I'd like to open it up for our participants. If there's any question, additional question that they want to ask before we move on to our next topic. Anyone want to take the mic and share everything? All right. AB, the question is...
Yes. I have a question here. See, we have been getting a lot of questions from home costs, like utilities, internet, stationery, printing. Yeah. I mean, because we didn't have an option of working from home previously. So suddenly when people move to their homes, these are additional costs. On top of that, there is a different angle to it. We had been paying transport allowance for people commuting to office and back, which is still being paid, but which is not being used. So how do we make a balance of these things? You know, is there a policy around it? Is there a general market practice?
Thank you, AB, for that question. Fadi, Amanda, can I leave it over to you?
Yes, may I please, Amanda?
Yes.
Some companies have amended their transportation allowance policy, and I know about a few of them. This amendment authorized the management to cut the transportation allowance during the lockdown. And that was because, according to these managements, okay, the employees are not coming to the office. The transportation allowance is being paid for employees to commute. So that's about the transportation allowance. Of course, it was not across the board for all companies, but some companies did it. To elaborate a little bit more about this subject, the vacation leave, for instance, some companies issued the amendments to their vacation leave policy, authorizing the management again to grant forced paid leave to the employees during the lockdown. Some other companies tackled the matter of the vacation tickets, for instance, and they made amendments to their policies where they canceled the vacation tickets or the equivalent in money to its employees for a period of 12 months. That's another one. Of course, we are not going to talk about travel policy, face-to-face meetings, and so on. So there have been a number of policies. Now, going back to the question regarding the utilities at home, there are two schools over here as well. I mean, some companies consider that by all means, okay, you have an internet at home. Some others are considering to look into that and compensate. But when it comes to coffee, tea, whatever, I don't think this is, I mean, something that, because this was raised, by the way, in the company where I am, and I don't think it was a matter. I mean, this is. I mean, the executive committee considered this as a minimal cost. Anyway, you are at home, and you are now. We come to the printing. We come to the papers. We come to the. For instance, in company, we distributed the typewriters or the printers on the people that need them. I mean, the company assets have been distributed. Of course, there were a list by IT to track all these printers because there are so many. And we distributed them along with all the consumables, whether it is the toner or the paper or whatever. Okay, the employees took them home during the lockdown.
Thank you, Fadi. So I believe that you made provision for essentials. If people had to do their job, you sent them the prisoners, the printers, prisoners. Amanda, have you got anything to say? I know we need to step on to topic 2 and 3 very briefly.
Just want to add that what is important, and I encourage everybody on the call to go back to your your employment contract and your policies, because what is in the employment contract is legally binding. So if you have an allowance in your employment contract that you have now amended, you need to get mutual agreement from your employees. So the engagement piece is really important to bring to agree to the change in their employment contract, if that's going to be a permanent.
Thank you.
If you're going to rewrite your policies, make sure that you write your policies in a manner that refers to unforeseen circumstances, which could be a pandemic or any other future incident that may get the organization to be a little bit more flexible about it, ancillary benefits. Just on the question about expenses, I think a lot of companies have asked that question, and when you have 10 people, it's one thing, but when you have 2,000 people all wanting to claim 100 dirhams, it all starts adding up. My recommendation would be to engage with finance and to roll out an expense policy where incidentals can be claimed for, but it has to be pre-approved by a manager or a department head.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amanda. What we have seen here, because we see quite a few of the companies and how they change their policies, is they've moved away from adding it in contracts, like you said, Amanda, because that's legally binding, moving it out and putting it into policies. So, for example, a transportation allowance will be provided, but the exact amounts is not added in the contract. It is it's taken care of by policies. Good. So can we move on to our next question? This has all to do about culture. How has culture changed in our companies? How difficult is it to manage culture? Had a question arise. That if we have a new employee that started, we've not interviewed them face to face. We had to do our onboarding remotely. They had to have a feeling for what the company is about, have to work in teams remotely. How does that affect our culture? Amanda, can I ask you this time to maybe give us your view on it, and then moving on to Fadi?
Absolutely, yes. People often make culture, organizational culture, very complex, but it's really simple. It's about two things. It's about what we do and how we do what we do. And important for the organization to retain some of their habits, if you want to give it a different word, just to make it easier for people to digest. For example, if it's been in the organization's culture to celebrate and get people together once a month, perhaps you have the finance person giving an update on financial situation, you may have sales targets that are shared, you might celebrate birthdays or achievements during the month. With this working from home and technology that we've all had to adapt with very quickly, it's important for the organization to retain those kinds of celebrations or habits that they've had in place previously. And we can see on the call this morning, it takes a little bit of effort, but it's nothing to send the snacks or the treats or the breakfast things that you would normally have in your organization to people's homes and get people on a call. Whether you have some people in the office and some people working from home, it's important to continue what the organization has previously done. Coming to the new employee, I must say that I've gone back to the onboarding buddy, which is something I let go of several years ago. And I can see in this scenario how important it is to have that onboarding buddy for a new person, because they have no idea what the habits of the organization is and what's the culture, and they haven't met everybody. So having an onboarding buddy is really important in these times.
That's interesting. Sorry, Amanda. Yes,
company values. It's values are owned by the organization and by individuals, and it's the responsibility of every person now more so than ever before to make sure that we call out when people are not honoring our values and not bringing them to play every day. And that's what's going to sustain the organization, is when we make sure that we highlight when people do something that are aligned to the values, but that we also address that privately when people are not honoring the values, and that will continue the company culture.
Good. Thank you. Thanks very much for those insights, Amanda. Very interesting about the buddy. I would really like to hear what the rest of the participants feel about buddy system, if that works for them. Fadi, your comments on the cultural change. I believe that we're running a little bit out of time, so I'm going to give you a heads up in about a minute or two.
Okay, thank you. As a matter of fact, I would like to elaborate a little bit on the new employees over here and the onboarding. And I would like to share a good practice that we have developed at NFPC recently. First of all, the orientation, well, let me start with the interview. At least one single face-to-face interview is being done. That's eminent. We have to have at least one. Then the rest can be online. Second, we come to the orientation. Of course, the HR does the orientation. And when it comes to the onboarding, what we have developed is 3 days or 4 days onboarding through the subject matter experts from each department for all the new joiners. We have a group of new joiners, maximum up to 15, ideally between 8 and 12. But maximum up to 15, where the subject matter experts, do the onboarding for, representing their own departments and for the mass or for the group. So that's how we are tackling it currently. I know that this is not enough for the time being. I do understand what Amanda is mentioning about the buddy, but this is becoming a little bit more difficult nowadays, especially that people are working remotely. With regards to the cultural change, there have been a number of cultural changes. Not only that, we are adapting to the new normal. The organization's priority now has moved to the safety and the well-being of its employees, because no employee is able to focus on his or her responsibilities if his or well-being or the well-being of his family is at risk. So the focus of the management has shifted, and which shifts also the culture as well. That's why it is vital for the organization to offer its employees all the support that they need to enable them to perform their functions and provide a safe workplace. And definitely this means, okay, each and every organization is investing in technology and in infrastructure to support the remote work and, of course, to enable the virtual collaboration capabilities.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fadi. For the rest of our participants, have there been, in your view, any changes in your culture, or how did you actually, how were you able to tell your employees about your culture, new employees that come aboard? And I think more importantly, how did you know when your employees were suffering, when they didn't cope well with staying at home? Anyone maybe want to share something along those lines? I see Aman is talking about quite a few things, the key factors. What do you think now work from home policy is going to impact the key factors when we are no longer interacting face to face? So Aman, I think that has to do with culture. We talk about how we engage our employees, how we train our employees, and employee trust. Can anyone share along those lines? Aideen is saying that weekly calls are really important. The communication, 3 employees need to talk about what their experiences are. Anyone want to comment on that? Aideen, thank you. That's been, that's quite interesting.
Diana, if I may, I mean, we are a business that didn't do work from home. And we still have come back into an environment where working from home is a matter of debate with the executive team. But I think we did really well, and it was all about the communication. Because of the kind of distance, you just have to engage with your teams, you know, couple of catch-ups during the day or touch points during the day so that everyone feels engaged and feels part of the bigger picture. Social interactions as well. People would do, you know, social town halls, quizzes like we just did earlier in the session, anything just to kind of keep people talking to each other and to kind of divert their minds, because you're kind of in a cocoon and you're only relating to a screen all the time. And of course, there was a lot of fatigue because you're on Zoom calls continuously, more than I guess you would be in terms of meetings if you were in the office. So these were just the bits and pieces that we had to be mindful of and that we kind of did whilst we were working from home.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Primala. Gulam is saying people are more efficient working from home. That's interesting. I heard the same thing, Gulam, that people are saying they're more efficient. However, when it came to working in teams, people needed that interaction, and it was now to move to virtual. And as Pramila was saying, you get zoomed out after a while. So to understand how to keep the communication going was a big factor for us internally. As most of you know, we have the 3 offices, 2 in Dubai and 1 office in Pakistan. So we were quite familiar with communication over various online methodologies. But what we did is our employee wellness coordinator had a schedule where she alternated and spoke to everyone, whether it was on WhatsApp, whether it was on a quick Zoom call, a phone call, every second day, because she couldn't go through all of them, you know, and we then had little teams of communicating, because it was that informal discussion that was incredibly important for us to pick up whether someone is struggling. And we actually did. We did find out that it was very hard for some of our employees that had kids that were living in smaller places and had to do their work from their kitchen table, where they had to be quite engaged and had to do quite intensive work. So we were able to make amendments based on that. All right, any last minute comments on this before I move on to us? And that's HR. What do we need to have for the future? What skills do we have? Any last minute comments? Right, I don't see any thumbs up. Arul, I saw a thumbs up previously. I will deal with that a little bit later on our previous topic. I think you wanted to say something, but I will spend time with you afterwards on this. Right, we're moving on to HR now. Do we need new skills? Do we need to brush off our old skills? What do we need to do? Do we still need to be a master of all trades? Do we still need to juggle all those balls? Fadi, can I ask you this time to, again, in a 1 minute overview, tell me about your views on what your views are on the skills.
Thank you, Diana, and apologies again if the construction which started earlier today at my neighbors you will be hearing it again. So it's very disruptive. Talking about the HR skills during the pandemic, definitely, I mean, we need to foster the communication. We covered this partially earlier today. We need to be highly adaptable as people and to drive the adaptability across the organization. We need to definitely show emotional maturity. And above all, we have to have business knowledge. I think, I mean, when we talk communication, we need to have this constant contact, if I may say, across the board, from top to bottom, management, employees, everybody. Everybody looks at the HR as the guide or the big brother. Everybody is expecting directions. Everybody wants to know what next or what to do. And everybody, they look at HR as the entity who will be able to drive the way or show the way to the employees. We can write a book on this. With regards to adaptability, of course, I mean, we spoke earlier about how adaptable we should be. This is a crisis. Okay, let's start, for instance, with the business continuity plan. I don't think that there is any business continuity plan across the globe that covers pandemics. So this is something for HR to jump in now, okay, and review the policy and make sure that, okay, this is covered, because there have been business continuity plans for earthquake, for fire, for whatever, but definitely not pandemics. So this comes under adaptability. Of course, adaptability means also conduct brief pandemic trainings to the employees, to enhance the employee and the organizational preparedness to respond effectively. So this is what I mean by adaptability. Of course, we covered the emotional maturity when we spoke about the well-being of the employees, how to protect the employees by prioritizing their health and safety at all times, optimize physical spaces when they come back to the office, as well as the functionality. It's very important, I mean, to make this balance as well. We spoke earlier about rolling out engagement well-being programs to drive the engagement and the resilience, and comes without saying also the constant disinfection and cleaning, the strategically placed hygiene stations, if I may say, the temperature checks, the prepared meals, for instance, pre-packed meals for the employees at the office, the contactless solutions, and most importantly as well, under emotional maturity, most probably the work-life balance, because people, because they are working from home or they are rotating, coming to the office, they are working over the weekends as well. So force the employees to take off. Yeah. So this is our role as HR.
Thank you, Fadi. Apologies, I'm interrupting you there. I see a few people need to go. If you guys will allow me 3 minutes more for those that have to go. Thank you for joining us. We will send this survey to you, and we will collate all of that so that we can give you something of substance to take back. Amanda, can you maybe in 1 minute give us an overview of critical new skills required for HR?
Absolutely. I think, to echo what Fadi said, it's important for HR to have all those skills and to let the organization know that we can manage. My perspective is slightly different, and I think it's industry specific depending on organization's need, but future roles definitely would be low, medium, and high tech roles. A month ago or so, and I'll ask Sefi to include the link in the feedback, Harvard Business Review sent out 21 new jobs of the future, and I don't know if any of you have looked at it, but there were some roles there that was very familiar to me, roles that I've played in the past, and roles that I didn't even ever think of having. The employee well-being director is really critical, because in times of these, it is really about emotional, physical, and mental well-being, and making sure that we capture that. So having the right skills and trained individual in the business to deal with that. There's also virtual reality counselors, where somebody needs to perhaps counsel a more previous generation individuals who are not familiar with artificial intelligence and virtual realities, because that will become the new norm, where you'll get a headset to wear for the day, and that will be your training or your onboarding, and it will be VR. So a lot of new technology related roles. My recommendation to people around the table and anybody in HR is to stay relevant, know what's going on in your industry particularly and what's coming, and how you can support your organization to make business decisions today that will impact you tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I think we can spend a whole session on this. I would like to know, again, quickly from people in the audience, any comments on our new relevance, new roles, new skills that we have to develop. Can you put that in the chat, or maybe a thumbs up that we can open that up? Gulam.
Yes, sorry, thanks. I just had a quick question. I know this is not something which is perhaps new, but I think it is probably at an unprecedented level where employees have to be laid off. And at the same time, there's so much uncertainty about the job market that people don't know how to reskill themselves to get new jobs. And Amanda kind of suggested a few kind of jobs which are going to be opening up more in the future. But from an HR perspective, has this added a lot of extra stress and or a certain requirement for a certain skill set to be able to guide people when they're being laid off or potentially could be laid off into how they can continue their lives? Diana, you're muted.
Amanda, can I maybe ask you to answer that question?
Gulam, thanks for the question. I think you can look at it from two different perspectives, and it's how people choose to deal with change. It can either be really daunting to think you have to really reskill yourself, but you can look at it from another perspective to say this is an opportunity to upskill and to really get excited about the future. I think there's so much more we can do. If you just look at the data that's available to HR and all the information, and you become a bit of a detective around the data you have, and ask the right questions about how is your organization using all the data that we have, data from IT, data from HR, data from the business, and just sit around the table with your colleagues and ask, what are we doing with this data, and how can we make this data relevant to the business, so that as HR, we are seen as business partners to help the organization make decisions, because all of us have all this data and it's not really well used. So my first and main recommendation would be look at the data in your organization and ask yourself, what are we doing with all of this information, and how can we use this to help the company? And of course, if there's anything relating to cost saving, you're going to keep your job.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Amanda. Thanks. Gulam, what we are also going to do is I'm going to, in the survey, ask the question what to do when HR have to cut jobs in their own community, and what skills do those HR have, so that we can hear from the rest of the people what their comments are. And Amanda, would you mind sharing that